What you're asking about is the fourth condition, which is, are there disadvantages that are advantages? Now that is the most fascinating one of all. So, for example, one of the most fascinating observations that's been made in recent years is that someone did a study recently that pointed out that 30% of American entrepreneurs have been diagnosed at some point in their life with a profound learning disability. And you know, you only have to, the list of people who fall into this category. So the dyslexics, you know, Branson's a dyslexic, Charles Schwab is a dyslexic, the guy who founded Kinko's is a dyslexic. I can go on. I mean, the list is like this long, right? So why is that? Well, the argument is that it's not a coincidence. Is in fact, it is a direct function. Their entrepreneurialism is a direct function of their disability. So how do you succeed if you cannot read or write from the very earliest stages in your elementary education? You compensate for that if you're the ones who make it. A lot of kids don't make it, but those who do compensate. How do they compensate? Well, from the very earliest age, you learn how to delegate. So kids who make it through school, who can't read or write, you know how they do it? They do it by having others do their reading and writing for them, right? You learn, you compensate by being a really good oral communicator. You can't write or read, so you're a talker, right? You learn how to problem solve, right? Because your life is one big problem. You're in an institution that asks you to do two things and you can't do either of them, right? And you learn how to be a leader. You have to do all those things, problem solve, delegate, oral communicate. You learn how to lead. In fact, there's a beautiful study that was also done that pointed out that of dyslexic entrepreneurs, 80% of them were a captain of a high school sports team versus 30% of non-dyslexic entrepreneurs. That's the character type, right? So when you get into the real world, and what is required of an entrepreneur? That they be a good leader, that they delegate, that they be a problem solver, and that they be good oral communicators. These people have been spending their whole life practicing the four skills that are at the cornerstone of entrepreneurial success. Now, if you talk to those people and you ask John Chambers, dyslexic, right, has difficulty reading his own email, right? You ask all those guys, what role did dyslexia play in your success? They would say, it wasn't an obstacle that I had to overcome. It is in fact the reason I'm successful. It is a disadvantage that ended up being an advantage. Now, this category to me is the most fascinating one of all. So let me give you another example. One of the most striking findings in educational research is that there's almost no payoff that we can find to reducing class size. Even though all parents are obsessed with class size, right? Irrationally so. Your kid is in a class size of 25 and you hear that at some other school it's 19, and so you pay $25,000 a year to get your kid into the school with the 19 kids instead of the 25, right? In fact, reams and reams and reams of academic studies have failed to show any advantage to smaller class sizes except for really disadvantaged kids in very, very early grades. For everyone else, it's a total wash. Why is it a wash? Because it makes no sense. Why would you do just as well in a class where the teacher's not paying you as much attention, right? Shouldn't there be a correlation between teacher inputs and student performance? Yes, but only if there is no such thing as a disadvantage that can be an advantage. What if the disadvantage of being in a large classroom is something that you compensate for? What if it's like dyslexia? What if you're one of 30 kids, you compensate and learn self-reliance, and that self-reliance in the end is just as important a trait as the thing that you would get from a heavy amount of teacher feedback, right? We are resolutely uninterested in the category of benefits that fall into that fourth category, right? We can't even talk about them. No one wants to talk about what are the kind of customized disadvantages that we might introduce into our school system that might have a positive effect, right? And we operate under this extraordinarily psychologically naive notion that the only thing that matters in school are advantages that are advantages, right? As if everything else didn't exist. Like, I would love to see, for example, I'm now ranting on and on, but it is not like, I live in Manhattan. In Manhattan, we have these super, super, super fancy private schools. The most advantaged private schools in the world, right? That cost 30 grand a year. high schools. I'm not convinced that those schools don't fall into the category of advantages that are disadvantages. I would love to know on a kind of see a systematic analysis of whether you're helped. Why is it the case that you're better off going to that school than learning how to cope in a far more heterogeneous, rough and tumble public school environment? It's not obvious to me why that's. In fact, most of the successful people who send their kids to those schools went to rough and tumble, heterogeneous public schools. So it is this massive act of cognitive dissonance that you turn on the very thing that clearly made you successful and deny it to your child, right? In the name of what, right? The same grandfather who says that he walked 7 miles to school every morning barefoot drives his grandchild in the SUV 2 blocks to school because it's raining out. If it worked for you, Grandpa, why doesn't it work for me? Right?